Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into the smoky, honey-sweet dusk of ancient Egypt, where dinner is being scraped together with a few crusts of bread, maybe some salted fish, and, if you're lucky, a bit of date wine that hasn't already turned to vinegar. You're not watching from a safe, modern distance tonight. No, you're there, sitting cross-legged on a reed mat by the Nile, dust in your sandals, mosquito bites blooming on your ankles, and the vague scent of roasted onions wafting from someone's cooking fire. The sky overhead is pink and peach, rippling like an old linen sheet. Palm trees sway lazily, and the river sloshes with soft menace. Mostly crocodiles, some hippos, and one particularly bold fisherman who clearly has no survival instincts. You can hear frogs and temple bells and someone arguing over whose turn it is to stir the grain porridge. Your stomach growls loudly. You've been hauling baskets of mud brick all day for some mid-level scribe's storage tomb, and now, finally, it's time to eat. Except your options aren't exactly Michelin-starred. A woman walks by balancing a shallow clay dish on her head. Inside, a grayish lump that looks like someone chewed grain and spit it back up. You smile politely and take it. Congratulations, your first taste of beer porridge. It's warm, slightly fizzy, and tastes like fermented sadness with a hint of old hay. Still, it's filling and it gets the job done. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lift the bowl to your lips, tilting it carefully to avoid splashing. The texture is interesting. Imagine oatmeal mixed with flat beer and bits of barley hulls. It's slightly sour, and some poor soul likely stomped the grain with bare feet. But in ancient Egypt, this stuff is life. Beer isn't just for feasting. It's breakfast, lunch, and occasionally medicine, especially when mixed with ground crocodile teeth. More on that delightful combo later. Around you, people are doing the same, chewing slowly, not speaking much. The sun saps your energy out here, and dinner is less a social event and more a desperate grab at calories. You hear children laughing as they steal honey cakes from a distracted vendor. One of the elders is whispering a prayer to Hathor, the goddess of pleasure and nourishment, before digging into what looks like a loaf of dark, seeded bread. That bread's called ta, and it's the backbone of the Egyptian diet. Dense, sour, and baked in round molds that leave the crust hard and the inside chewy, if you're lucky. If not, you're probably munching on one of the infamous sand loaves. See, they use stone grinding tools, which means actual bits of rock end up in your flour. Yes, you're basically eating sandpaper. The average Egyptian smiles with broken teeth. You take another bite of your soggy barley mash. There's a hint of date in this one, a treat. Dates are sweet, sticky, and grow in abundance here. Sometimes they're mashed into paste and stuffed into bread. Other times, they're fermented into wine that smells like regret and gives you visions of ibis gods scolding you for drinking before dusk. Nearby, someone's roasting something over a tiny clay brazier. The smell is smoky and oddly sweet. You wander over and see a little skewer of... Is that hedgehog? It is. Wrapped in clay, roasted whole, then cracked open like a crunchy little piñata. You pass. You've had enough mystery meat this week. In the distance, the temple drums start slow, rhythmic. A group of priests is finishing evening rituals, and one of them is carrying a tray of offerings. Bread, onions, beer. These gods eat well. Or, more accurately, the priests do, because after the ceremony, Guess who gets to eat those sacred snacks? Spoiler, not the statue. You watch as one of the temple assistants sets the tray down, bows, and then slinks back to steal a slice of bread when no one's looking. Historians still argue whether those post-offering meals were symbolic, sacred, or just an excuse for a snack. Either way, the gods never complain. Back at your spot near the river, the wind picks up slightly. You hunch over your bowl and try not to think about the mosquito buzzing near your ear. A few workers are sharing a jug of thick beer, passing it carefully. It's cloudy, full of grain bits and served room temperature. Room being the open air under a reed canopy. You take a swig. Yep, still tastes like barley, yeast, and mild despair. But this is what dinner looked like for most ancient Egyptians, simple, starchy, and repetitive. And yet, there's something comforting about it. The world is small here. Your needs are basic. Hunger, shade, and not getting trampled by a donkey. You chew slowly, staring at the Nile as the last orange light disappears. Tomorrow you'll eat something similar. And the next day, too. But maybe, if you're lucky, a scribe will drop a fig into your bowl. Or a soldier might share dried fish from his rations. Or, dream of dreams, someone will hand you a honey-drenched pastry left over from a temple feast. You stretch out on your mat, listening to frogs croak and priests chant, belly full of beer porridge and river wind. Your eyes get heavy. You smell baked bread from a faraway kitchen. And in the back of your mind, a little voice whispers, "You're definitely going to chip a tooth on that bread tomorrow." You wake with a stiff neck and a mouth that tastes faintly of barley paste and last night's regret. The Nile hums beside you, soft and sluggish, as the sky slides into its daily blue. The heat hasn't hit yet, but it's coming, like a sweaty, relentless god with garlic breath. You roll up your reed mat, dust the sand from your shoulders, and join the quiet shuffle toward breakfast. It's not exactly a buffet. A woman hands you a slab of dark, sour-smelling bread. It's heavy, dense. You thump it against your palm, and it makes a solid, weapon-like sound. This is emmer bread, made from ground emmer wheat, a grain that's older than most of the gods you've heard of. It's sour because it ferments before baking, which keeps it from spoiling too fast in the heat. Also, ancient Egyptians hadn't quite cracked the concept of fluffy. You tear into it. It's dry, chewy, and there it is. Grit. Every bite crunches faintly, a reminder that your flour was ground with sandstone tools. You pause to pick a rock out from between your molars. Don't worry, broken teeth were practically a badge of honor back then. Archaeologists often find Egyptian skulls with worn-down enamel and dental abscesses, all thanks to good old sand bread. Still chewing, you pass a cart selling onions. Big purple things, fresh from the field. You grab one and bite into it raw. Sharp, spicy, and vaguely tear-inducing. Not bad, honestly. Onions were medicine, food, and divine offering all rolled into one pungent little bulb. Soldiers were paid in them. Priests swore by them. Some folks even got buried with a few clutched in their hands, like a fragrant ancient snack pack for the afterlife. Next up, a clay pot of what appears to be bean mash. Fava beans, if you want to get technical, though back then they were just called those things that make you bloated but keep you alive. You scoop some with your bread, and the texture is, well, let's call it chunky hummus's evil cousin. Still, it's warm, filling, and seasoned with what might be salt or sand. Again, a donkey brays in the distance, A boy runs past carrying a basket of dried fish, the sharp scent slicing through the morning air. You trade a handful of beans for a small, salted tilapia. It's hard and leathery, dried in the sun and probably caught a week ago. Still, it's protein. You gnaw around the bones carefully, trying not to stab your gums. Just a normal start to the day. You pass a neighbor crouched near a fire, blowing into a clay oven to bake her family's bread for the day. The oven looks like a stubby beehive with flames licking out of the top. She's already sweating. Flour dust clings to her forearms. You nod in solidarity. Bread is life here, literally. The Egyptian word for life and bread were basically interchangeable. The government collected taxes in loaves. And if you wanted to win someone over, don't bother with love poems. Just bring warm bread. Around mid-morning, the sun begins to glare. You seek shade near a small courtyard, where someone's selling cucumbers and leeks. You buy a few with your last bread ration. The cucumber is cool and juicy, a rare delight in a place where most things are dried, fermented, or sun-baked to oblivion. The leek, though, kind of tastes like if garlic and sadness had a baby. Still, it's food, and it'll keep your breath strong enough to repel crocodiles and romantic partners alike. Somewhere behind you, two men are arguing. Apparently one of them stole a barley loaf from the communal oven. Bread theft was serious business. There are tomb paintings showing guards beating thieves with sticks for nabbing an extra roll. You quietly back away and pretend to be very interested in a patch of dirt. As you munch your cucumber, you remember the story of an ancient noble who claimed he could tell someone's class by the quality of their bread. A common laborer's loaf? Crusty, overbaked, laced with straw. A noble's? Soft, white, and made with imported wheat. Historians still argue whether such class-based flour snobbery was widespread or just ancient elitist drama. You stop at a shady wall where a group of children are playing a game with pebbles and a painted board scratched into the dust. One of them is eating a fig, sticky, deep purple, and stolen from somewhere, judging by the smug look on her face. You're too tired to care. Also, that fig looks delicious. Someone nearby bites into a boiled egg. You stare. Eggs are a delicacy. Mostly duck or goose if you're lucky. You don't ask where it came from, but you do note the greenish ring around the yolk. That's probably intentional. Probably. Later, as you trudge back toward the work site, a vendor tries to sell you a handful of roasted lupin beans. They're slightly bitter and need soaking to remove toxins, but who's got time for that? You pop a few in your mouth, chew, and feel the grit settle between your teeth like tiny regrets. Ancient snacking at its finest. Before you leave the square, you hear a woman call out that she's got fresh date cakes. Moist, sweet, and rolled in crushed nuts. You dig through your satchel for a few beetles, a makeshift currency among the very desperate, and snag one. It melts on your tongue. For a moment, you forget about sand in your bread and pickled fish breath. This is the rhythm of ancient Egyptian meals for ordinary folks. Gritty bread, raw onions, fermented drinks, and the occasional surprise figure. It's repetitive, it's functional, and it's strangely comforting. Still chewing your date cake, you catch a glimpse of a nobleman passing by on a litter. You smell perfumes and roasted meat. You raise a brow. Lucky guy. You bet his bread doesn't break teeth. By midday, the sun is less a celestial body and more of a personal grudge. You're melting. Your tunic clings to you, damp and scratchy, and your feet feel like they've been baking in clay ovens. You duck into the shade of a tall stone wall etched with hieroglyphs, half religious devotion, half ancient graffiti. Someone has carved a pretty convincing cat playing a harp. As you rest, a breeze carries the scent of something rare and tantalizing, roasted meat. Your stomach clenches in surprise. Real meat isn't exactly an everyday luxury for people like you. It's expensive, sacred, and usually hoarded by priests, nobles, or anyone with the audacity to be born into the right family. Still, where there's smoke, there's skewers. You wander toward the smell and find a small courtyard. A group of laborers is clustered around a low fire pit. One of them, probably the foreman, judging by the size of his belly, is turning a spit. On it, a scrawny goose, legs sticking out stiffly. Not the plump kind you've seen painted on tomb walls, but a wild one, probably trapped near the marshes. It hisses and crackles over the flames. You're offered a tiny sliver of meat, mostly skin but smoky and rich. Here's the thing. Meat in ancient Egypt was a status symbol. For the average citizen, a proper cut of beef or lamb only appeared during festivals, temple offerings, or funerals, preferably someone else's. But on days like today, when someone's uncle managed to trade a sack of lentils for a bird, it's a cause for celebration. You chew slowly, savoring the salty, crispy taste. Someone else passes you a bite of dry jerky, likely from a cow sacrificed during a temple feast. It's tough as leather and could probably double as a sandal strap, but it's protein, and you're grateful. You glance up at a nearby relief carved into the temple wall. It shows a banquet. Rows of sleek nobles lounging on cushions, fanning themselves while servants pour wine and deliver pyramids of roasted duck legs. You're not bitter or anything, but it does seem unfair that their pets probably eat better than you do. Still, every now and then, meat trickles down. A nobleman might host a public feast to gain favor with the gods, or just the local gossip mill. When that happens, tables overflow with grilled fish, pigeon stew, and something called meatballs, which are less Italian grandma and more random organs wrapped in intestines and boiled in spiced beer. Delicious-ish. Historians still argue whether meat was truly rare for everyone or just underrepresented in the surviving records. Some believe commoners ate more animal protein than previously thought, especially fish and wild birds. Others insist that was only true for people living along the fertile banks of the Nile, not the desert poor. Either way, you're not turning down this chance. The laborers share stories while they eat. One claims his cousin caught a crocodile once and tried to roast the tail. Another says he watched a priest smuggle temple beef home under his robe. A third insists that hippo meat tastes like beefy fish, but in a bad way. You smile and keep chewing. In the far corner of the courtyard, someone brings out a pot of stew. It's thick, dark, and smells of garlic and cumin. You dip your bread in it. The flavor is intense, spiced lentils and maybe bits of lamb fat. It's the kind of dish you'd only see during feast days or after a generous temple offering. It warms your belly and brings a tear to your eye, or maybe that's just the onions. Back in the city center, smoke drifts from a higher-class kitchen. Slaves and servants move quickly, carrying trays covered with linen cloth. You can only imagine what's underneath. Honey-glazed duck, oxtail stew, or grilled quail stuffed with figs. The elite had cooks trained to prepare meat delicacies with dried herbs, imported spices, and wine reductions. You, meanwhile, just ate pigeon jerky with your fingers. Still, meat was more than a luxury. It was a ritual. Offerings of beef and goose were made to the gods daily. Temples employed butchers whose job was as sacred as it was bloody. After the gods were fed, translation, ignored the meat entirely, the priests got to feast. You might be allowed a bite if you were particularly devout or particularly sneaky. Someone nearby mentions a rumor, a royal banquet coming up, a festival of Osiris. That means extra rations for workers, fish grilled with leeks, maybe even some smoked goat if the priests are feeling generous. You mentally begin planning how to look more devout. As the courtyard quiets, you lean against a mud brick wall and close your eyes. Your belly is full of stew and bird and dreams of better cuts of meat. You drift into a soft doze. In your dream, you're at one of those banquet scenes, lounging next to a noblewoman in a gold collar, a fan in one hand and a goose leg in the other. She offers you a bite. You open your mouth, only to wake up and find yourself drooling in the dust, with a beetle crawling across your foot. Back to reality. You sit up, stretch your limbs, and prepare to get back to work. But you walk a little slower now, a little heavier, a little more hopeful. Meat might be rare, but it's not impossible. You just have to be lucky, or clever, or really, really good at pretending to worship temple goats. As you step into the sun again, someone offers you a final treat, a skewer of grilled liver, charred, smoky, and faintly metallic. You take it with both hands, because tonight you're dreaming of banquets. The sun has reached that late afternoon angle where everything turns the color of old papyrus and your shadow stretches out like it's trying to escape. You follow the curve of the Nile, weaving through the reeds where the air smells of wet earth and lotus flowers. If you squint past the fish rot and donkey dung, it's time to gather ingredients for tonight's dinner, and you're hoping for something that isn't just another round of barley and onion surprise. You step onto a narrow boat, more of a hollowed-out log really, and push off with a reed pole. The Nile glitters under you, thick with mud and history. Every gust of wind brings whispers from the river. Gossip about crocodiles in the shallows, hippos stomping near the banks, and fishermen telling fish tales the size of barges. Fishing in ancient Egypt is as essential as sand in your sandals. It's not just a job. It's a daily performance, a gamble, and a lunch plan all in one. You cast a weighted net over the side, watching it balloon out like a jellyfish. It sinks slowly, catching the sunlight before vanishing beneath the surface. Your boat bobs while you wait. A neighbor floats by, yelling that he caught a Nile perch this big, arms stretched comically wide. You raise a skeptical eyebrow. Most catches are far more humble. Tilapia, mullet, and catfish, bread and butter fish, though more bones than butter. You pull in the net with a grunt. Inside, 2 small tilapia and something that might be a boot. Success. You'll scale the fish later with a sharpened shard of pottery and gut them near the water's edge. Careful not to attract cats. Cats are sacred here, but they're also freeloaders. Turn your back for a second, and your dinner's hissing off into the bushes with a fish tail in its mouth. As you paddle back to shore, you spot a family harvesting lotus roots. Fat, white bulbs pulled from the murky shallows. They're crunchy, mildly sweet, and good boiled or roasted. Plus, they grow just about anywhere the water stands still long enough. You trade one of your fish for a bundle of the roots. The deal is sealed with a nod and a half-smile. No paperwork, just mud and mutual understanding. Walking home, you pass a row of date palms. You pluck a few from a low-hanging bunch, sticky, brown, and sun-warmed. The perfect dessert. Dates are everywhere in Egypt. Eaten plain, mashed into cakes, or fermented into wine, they're the sugar of the ancient world. You pop one into your mouth and immediately regret it. This one's been half-eaten by a beetle. You discreetly spit and move on. At home, the hearth is lit. Your cooking station is basically a few stones around a pit, a clay pot, and one suspiciously dented pan. You start with the fish, gutted, rubbed with salt and crushed coriander seeds, and laid gently in the pan. They sizzle, their skin curling in the heat. You imagine you're one of those fancy palace cooks with 20 servants and an apron made of linen. In reality, you're squatting barefoot in a smoky haze, swatting at flies with a spoon. Tonight's meal is modest but honest. Grilled fish with boiled lotus root, spiced lentils, left over from yesterday, and a handful of cucumbers soaked in sour palm vinegar. You've got pickled radish on the side, sharp, funky, and just shy of suspicious. Add in a few slices of emmer bread and some mashed beans, and it's a full-on feast for a working stiff. You eat slowly, savoring the mix of salt, spice, and earthy vegetables. This is everyday cuisine, what the scribes and bakers and field workers lived on. Not glamorous, but it keeps you going. And sometimes, even the humble dishes have surprising flair. Take garlic, for instance. It's in everything. You mash it into beans, rub it on fish, and sprinkle it over stews. Ancient Egyptians believed it had protective powers, not just from evil spirits, but also from, fainting on the job. Pyramid builders were fed garlic daily. It was their Red Bull. Another fringe favorite? Fermented fish paste. It's exactly as terrifying as it sounds. Fish left to rot, salted, and then squashed into jars. The result? A pungent, umami-laced goo used like a condiment. Think of it as ancient ketchup. With a grudge. Historians still argue whether average folks really use spices like cumin, coriander, and cinnamon regularly, or if those were mostly reserved for the upper crust. Some scrolls suggest market stalls sold these in tiny amounts, while others say most people never touched the stuff. You, however, found a little pouch in a market last week and have been hoarding it like a dragon. Dinner wraps up with dates and a few sips of palm wine, sharp, yeasty, and a little fizzy. Made from the fermented sap of date palms, it's the ancient version of a cheap beer. Not terrible. You raise your clay cup to the stars and toast your fish, your boat, and the cat that didn't steal anything for once. Your belly is full, your fingers are sticky, and your hair smells like smoke and cumin. You sit in the fading light, listening to the frogs croak and the breeze ripple through the reeds. Somewhere across the river, drums begin to beat. A ritual, a wedding, a very intense game of ancient Monopoly? Hard to say, but the rhythm carries, and it feels like the whole land is humming. You sigh and lean back against the cool mud brick. Tomorrow you'll fish again. You'll barter for onions, wrestle cats, and pray the fish paste hasn't turned into actual poison. But tonight you've eaten like a pharaoh. If the pharaoh had a budget. The stars have begun their quiet climb across the inky sky, and the air has cooled enough that your skin no longer feels like it's roasting in its own brine. It's the perfect time for a slow walk through your village. Just you, your tired legs, and the occasional bleat of a confused goat. You round a corner and catch a scent on the air. Sweet, nutty, just barely charred. Someone's baking. You follow your nose to a small open-air oven, a round, clay tandoor-like structure sunk into the ground. A woman stands beside it, flipping flat discs of dough with calloused fingers. Bread. Glorious, glorious bread. In ancient Egypt, bread was life. It was more than a food. It was currency, offering, and weapon if stale enough. You probably eat it 3 times a day in some form. Flat, risen, round, oblong, sometimes burnt, sometimes so full of sand it doubles as an exfoliant. Today's batch smells promising. Made from emmer wheat, lightly dusted with crushed flaxseed, and wait for it, no visible pebbles. A win. You watch the woman work, her hands a blur as she shapes the dough, pats it thin, and slaps it onto the hot oven wall. It sticks with a soft hiss and begins to bubble. After a minute or two, she peels it off with a hooked stick, and voila, a warm, golden piece of edible joy. You trade her a handful of dried dates and tuck the hot bread under your arm like a prize scroll. Emmer wheat, the main grain in your diet, is a tough customer. Its hulls cling tighter than a toddler at bedtime, which means grinding it into flour takes effort, and stones. Literally. The grinding stones wear down, mixing microscopic grit into the flour. Hence, that pleasant crunch you sometimes feel in your molars? Not sesame seeds, actual sand. Still, the Egyptians were nothing if not resourceful. They made beer with emmer, porridge, and about 50 types of bread. Some were filled with honey or figs, others shaped like animals for religious ceremonies. You've even seen one that looked suspiciously like a hedgehog. A delicious, doughy hedgehog. Tonight, you tear off a corner of your bread and dip it in a small bowl of lentil paste. It's warm, spicy, and miracle of miracles, garlic heavy. You chase it with sips of cold water from a ceramic jug, its surface slick with condensation. While you chew, your neighbor stumbles over carrying a basket of pastries. He's been to the temple market, where bakers sometimes sell their blessed leftovers, slightly squashed, but still edible. He shares one with you. A small dome of dough stuffed with crushed dates and drizzled with honey. It's sticky, rich, and probably the closest you'll ever get to cake. Baking, for most people, isn't done at home. Your kitchen lacks the space and the firepower. So, communities share large outdoor ovens. Women line up with bowls of dough, each loaf marked with a unique symbol or twist so they can tell which is whose. Like a sourdough-themed episode of Ancient Bake Off. The conversation turns to beer because it always does. Bread's frothy sibling, beer is your other daily staple. You make it by fermenting partially baked loaves in water, tossing in date juice or herbs for flavor. The result? A cloudy, soupy drink that fills your belly and dulls the sting of another day hauling limestone. It's less cheers and more chew your beverage. Historians still argue whether this beer was nutritious or mildly toxic. Some claim it provided essential calories and vitamins. Others say it was basically ancient sludge that kept you drunk enough not to notice your job was chiseling tiny falcons into walls for 10 hours a day. You finish your meal in the company of fireflies and laughter. Children chase each other between houses, tossing bread crusts to the dogs. A pair of elders sit nearby, debating whether the new baker downriver uses too much yeast. Someone swears they saw a loaf shaped like a pharaoh's head. Blasphemy or brilliant marketing? The jury's out. As you tidy up, you tuck a leftover roll into a linen pouch. It'll be tomorrow's breakfast, or bait for that sneaky alley cat, depending who gets there first. Back inside, your home is cool and quiet. You place your water jar by the doorway and your bread bundle near your sleeping mat. The walls are painted with faded symbols, protective deities mostly, and one very disproportionate cow. Bread and beer. These are your constants. Pharaohs might dine on flamingo tongues and honey-roasted hyena. Probably not, but who's fact-checking? But you've got dough, fire, and yeast. And honestly, you wouldn't trade them for the world. Except maybe during festival week. Then you'd happily ditch it all for roast duck and honeyed figs. The stars outside glimmer over the Nile. Somewhere a hippo bellows. The night is soft, and the air carries the last sense of smoke and dough. You curl up, stomach warm with bread and beer, and dream of tomorrow's batch. Maybe this time you'll try shaping it like a cat. Your eyes crack open just as the faintest blush of dawn smudges the horizon, and you're greeted by the gentle, persistent squawk of ibis birds and the unmistakable smell of something fermenting. Again, morning in ancient Egypt is a mix of serenity, stench, and stomping feet, and today is no exception. You stretch, roll onto your side, and notice the bread roll you tucked away last night has disappeared. So has your cat. Classic. Time to start the day, and in Egypt, the first order of business, aside from cursing whoever invented mornings, is grabbing a bite before heading into the heat. Breakfast isn't flashy. It's quick, salty, and functional. You tear another piece from yesterday's emmer loaf, dunk it into leftover lentil stew, and sprinkle it with crushed onions. The flavors are assertive, but you're awake now, so mission accomplished. You pack a small basket with provisions, onions, cucumbers, a few salted fish wrapped in palm leaves, and set out. Today you're heading into the fields. Agriculture is the heartbeat of your world. Egypt's entire existence clings to the mercy of the Nile's flooding. Too much, and everything drowns. Too little, and nothing grows. But when it's just right, the floodwaters leave behind rich black silt that turns sand into paradise. You reach your plot near the floodplain. It's a lush quilt of green, where farmers like you plant flax, barley, wheat, leeks, and more. Your task today, harvest onions. Lots of them. You get to work, bent low, pulling them from the earth with rhythmic tugs. Your fingers are soon coated in mud. Your back starts to hum with complaint, and your nose begins its protest against the relentless onion aroma. While you labor, your mind drifts toward lunch. You've got pickled fish, fresh bread, and maybe, if the gods are smiling, some leftover beans. You nibble on a cucumber, its crunch cool and clean, a small oasis in your mouth. A fellow worker nearby is digging up garlic. Lots of it. Garlic is everywhere, eaten raw, cooked, mashed, or even offered to the gods. Soldiers were especially fond of it, believing it boosted stamina. Whether it did or not is unclear, but you'd believe anything if it meant surviving another march through the desert. There's also lettuce. And no, not the sad sandwich filler you know today. Ancient Egyptian lettuce was long, bitter, and often associated with fertility, which is why it shows up in temple carvings looking suspiciously exaggerated. Historians still argue whether it was eaten raw, used as medicine, or mostly saved for symbolic rituals. You just know it keeps your stomach quiet till dinner. By midday, the sun is a white-hot god staring you down, and your limbs feel boiled. You collapse under a shady acacia tree with your coworkers. Time for lunch. The pickled fish hits your tongue like a vinegar thunderclap, sharp, salty, and strangely satisfying. You wash it down with a swig of that thick, sour beer. Someone jokes it's been aged since yesterday. You all laugh, half delirious from the sun. Someone passes around slices of raw onion, pungent and powerful enough to repel not just hunger, but possibly your future spouse. In the background, you hear farmers arguing over irrigation channels. The Nile is generous, but she's not organized. Water has to be guided, measured, prayed over, and occasionally bribed with tiny boat-shaped offerings. You once heard about a village that sacrificed a clay hippo to get the floods to cooperate. Desperate times, desperate pottery. The afternoon stretches long and hot, and your mind wanders again to the more curious side of ancient farming. Did you know crocodile dung was used in certain fertility concoctions? Or that locusts were considered both plague and snack, depending on the season? Someone even told you about a recipe involving boiled lizard and honey for chest problems, they claimed. You're not sure if that meant illness or indigestion. Farming is dirty, sacred, and endlessly repetitive. You plant, you water, you harvest. Then you do it again. Your fingers develop permanent calluses. Your skin turns to bronze. And your sense of humor? Well, it survives on sarcasm and half-cooked onions. As the sun begins to sink, painting the fields gold, you gather your harvest and head back toward the village. The smell of smoke and roasting vegetables greets you at the edge of town. Someone's making stew. You hope they're using coriander this time. Last week's attempt tasted like boiled sandals. You unload your basket and take stock. Onions, garlic, a few tender leeks, and some wild herbs you found growing near the canal. Tonight's dinner will be a thick vegetable porridge, flavored with whatever isn't spoiled or crawling away. Before going in, you pause by the well, scooping water to wash your face. The reflection that stares back is tired, dust-covered, and a little wild-eyed, but undeniably alive. You survived another day in the fields. You fed your body, fed your family, and maybe, just maybe, didn't lose a toe to your sandals this time. The wind kicks up, and the scent of cumin and frying lentils wraps around you like a sleepy lullaby. You sigh, pat your belly, and head home, ready to eat, rest, and dream again of a life filled with less garlic breath. But let's be honest, you'd probably miss it. You're halfway through peeling a leek, sitting cross-legged by the fire, when the unmistakable clatter of a copper pot topples over behind you. No one flinches. It's just another neighbor trying to remember where they stashed their dinner 2 hours ago. Evening in ancient Egypt hums with quiet commotion. Dogs barking at shadows, children arguing about whose turn it is to sweep the doorstep, and a chorus of bubbling clay pots cooking what could generously be called a stew, if one is feeling generous. Tonight, you're feeling brave. You've decided to try a new dinner recipe. Fava bean mash with leeks, lentils, and a side of cucumbers in sour milk. It's a risky combination, the kind that could either lull you into a satisfied coma or have you sprinting to the nearest shrub at midnight. But you live on the edge, culinarily speaking. The ancient Egyptian dinner scene is a vibrant, earthy affair. Think thick pulses, grilled veggies, plenty of garlic, and if you're lucky, the occasional scrap of meat. Vegetarianism isn't a trendy lifestyle choice here. It's just reality for most folks. You've maybe had fish once this week, salted and dried until it was roughly as chewable as roof tile. You toss another leek into the stew pot and stir. A breeze wafts through your open doorway, carrying with it the scent of your neighbor's dinner. Possibly duck, possibly roasted catfish. Hard to tell through the cumin. Either way, you're jealous. In higher-class homes, dinner's a whole different drama. Wealthy Egyptians might feast on roasted goose, honey-glazed locusts, beef ribs, and desserts sweetened with date syrup and lotus petals. Their banquets were more spectacle than sustenance. Guests lounging on mats, fanned by servants, sipping wine from alabaster goblets, and trying not to pass out in front of their crush. Historians still argue whether such banquets were regular events or rare temple blowouts. Some scrolls describe week-long feasts with multiple courses and entertainment. Others hint that daily life, even for the rich, was just a slightly fancier version of yours with better cushions. But let's get back to your meal. The fava beans are done. You mash them roughly with a stone pestle, mixing garlic, oil, and coriander and taste. Not bad. You serve it with flatbread, slightly overbaked, but still softer than your cousin's version that once chipped someone's tooth. There's also sour milk on the side, which you dip your cucumber slices into. The tang balances the bean mash surprisingly well. You imagine a future where someone bottles this combo and calls it ancient Egyptian fusion. Probably sells it for 15 drachmas a jar. You eat slowly, savoring each bite, because there's no rush. The night is cool, the village is calm, and your stomach is cooperating for now. After dinner, your family gathers around the fire for small talk. Your grandmother launches into a story about how, in her day, lentils were fatter, and fish actually had meat on them. You smile and nod, chewing on a leftover olive pit so you don't have to respond. A child asks what happens if you eat too many onions. Someone replies, "You start talking to the dead," and everyone laughs, probably because it's not entirely untrue. The line between food and medicine or poison is thin here. Eat too much lettuce? It might cool your passions, as the priests say. Chew enough frankincense? Your breath smells great, but you'll regret it at both ends. There's a quirky tidbit you remember hearing once. Something about priests refusing to eat beans because they believed they contained the souls of the dead. Sounds like nonsense, but then again, you've eaten some beans that tasted like they were definitely haunted. You finish the meal with a small fig, split in half and shared. Sweet, sticky, and slightly gritty with Nile dust. It's still better than anything you've had in weeks. The fire crackles softly. Your belly is full. And for once, no one is complaining about the pickled radish shortage. Before bed, you rinse your hands in a bowl of perfumed water. Just a few crushed lotus petals floating in a clay dish. It's a small luxury, but one that marks the line between survival and civility. You dab your face dry and stretch out on your woven mat. Outside, someone plays a low, reedy tune on a flute. It's a lullaby or a prayer, or maybe just an attempt to drown out the snoring next door. You listen, lulled by the music and the steady rhythm of life in a place where dinner isn't just a meal. It's a ritual of endurance, invention, and onion-laced community. Your last thought before sleep? Next time, maybe less garlic. Or more. Depends how adventurous you're feeling. You wake before dawn to a sound you've come to accept as morning music. A donkey braying like it's seen the afterlife and wasn't impressed. Another day begins, and with it, another round of kitchen alchemy. Because in ancient Egypt, food isn't just about eating. It's about transforming mud and fire into something vaguely delicious. Today, you're not farming. You've been invited to help prepare food for a temple offering. A rare and slightly intimidating honor. The priest who summoned you gave only a curt nod and a basket of ingredients. Dates, barley, honey, and dried goose meat. No pressure. You arrive at the temple courtyard, which smells like incense, old stone, and a faint hint of wet goat. A line of servants is already busy grinding barley into flour on large basalt querns, their arms working in slow, meditative circles. You're assigned to the date mashing team. You tie your hair back with a linen strip and get to work, pressing sticky dates into a thick paste with your palms until they resemble something between molasses and regret. The resulting date goo will be mixed with crushed nuts and honey to make a sweet cake, one of the more prized offerings to the gods. It's labor-intensive, messy, and likely to leave your hands smelling like fermented raisins for the next 3 weeks. But hey, it's divine work. You glance over at the goose preparation team. They're plucking feathers, gutting the bird, and stuffing it with leeks and coriander. You'd kill for just one bite of that roast. Literally, probably, meat like that doesn't come around often. Historians still argue whether most temple offerings were ever eaten by the priests or burned completely in ritual. You suspect a little of both. A charred wing for the gods, the juicy thigh for the high priest's meditative snacking. Curiously, some temples even offered loaves shaped like gods or animals. One rumor says there was once a lion-headed bread so detailed it scared a child into silence for 2 days. A miracle in itself. You're then asked to help prepare beer. And not the golden, fizzy stuff you might be picturing. This is more like liquid bread. Thick, sour, and teeming with floating grain chunks. You crush sprouted barley, mix it with water, and leave it in the sun to ferment. A priest chants nearby while you stir, as if your dubious hygiene practices will somehow be sanctified by his mutterings. Beer is sacred. It's not just sustenance, it's life, social glue, and, in some cases, a very convincing excuse for poor decisions. The goddess Hathor was known for her beer-soaked celebrations, some of which involved music, dancing, and slightly tipsy worshippers trying to balance lotus blossoms on their noses. Lunch during temple duty is a quiet affair. You sneak off with a few fig cakes and a slice of dried fish, munching in the shadow of a pillar carved with hieroglyphs of crops and cattle. It's oddly comforting to think someone 800 years ago was probably sitting in this exact spot, hiding their snack from temple overseers too. You return to the kitchen, where the air is thick with spice and steam. One pot simmers with lentils and celery. Another roasts chickpeas until they pop like pebbles in oil. The head cook, a woman with arms like granite, tosses a pinch of fenugreek into a sauce and warns you not to breathe too deeply unless you want to smell like a sick cow for days. You don't test her theory. While slicing leeks, you overhear a debate between two junior priests. Was it really true that crocodiles once attended temple ceremonies? The argument spirals into speculation about whether animals could understand hymns or were just there for the leftovers. You quietly side with the leftover theory. As the sun slants low, golden light pours through the temple colonnades. The final dishes are prepared. Platters of bread shaped like lotus flowers, bowls of pickled radishes and onions, honey cakes stamped with the eye of Horus. Everything is arranged with reverence, each item placed exactly as prescribed by ritual scrolls older than anyone alive. You stand back, hands sticky with date syrup and flour dust, watching as the priests file in to begin the ceremony. Incense curls into the sky, chants echo off the stone walls, and somewhere between the goose and the beer your stomach growls, loudly. You're allowed to take a leftover barley cake before you leave. It's dry, slightly burnt, and contains an unexpected date pit that nearly cracks your molar. But it's yours. As you step back into the street, you feel oddly proud. Today, your food wasn't just for sustenance. It was for God's, or at least, for their hungriest servants. You stroll home, cake in hand, passing a neighbor who offers you a wink and a roasted onion on a stick. You accept it, of course. This is Egypt. Onions are currency, cuisine, and possibly a form of mild addiction. As you chew, you wonder what's for dinner tomorrow. Probably lentils, definitely garlic, and maybe, just maybe, a sliver of honeycomb if the gods are still feeling generous. You sleep deeply after your temple shift, dreaming of barley cakes chasing you down a hallway made of onions. When you wake, the sun's already high and hot, your body groaning like a cart with a broken wheel. But it's market day, and that means one thing. Today you eat differently. Not better necessarily, just differently. You make your way through the bustling village path, dust kicking up around your ankles, the air thick with the scent of sweat, spices, and the unmistakable tang of donkey. This market isn't Cairo-sized. It's a local affair. A handful of stalls and mats laid out under patched linen awnings. But it's where everything happens. Gossip, deals, and culinary experiments no one asked for. You're here for ingredients, but more than that, you're here for inspiration. Your pantry's down to salt, old lentils, and something you think is dried fig but might also be a mouse that gave up. So yes, you need ideas. First stop, the bread seller. He's slicing loaves shaped like birds. Some are simple doves, others weirdly muscular hawks. For Hather, he says, grinning. You buy one even though it's more crust than crumb. Bread's not just food, it's status. Flatbreads for the poor, fancy molds and yeast-fermented loaves for the rich. You've seen some with added dates, coriander, even cow's milk. A friend once swore she had bread stuffed with frog legs. Historians still argue whether that was ever a thing or just culinary blasphemy. Across the way, a spice woman waves you over. Her display is chaos. Piles of dried herbs, crushed petals, and something that smells like disappointment. You sniff your way down the line. Fenugreek, dill, cumin, mint, marjoram. The mint is especially popular, used not just in food but as a breath freshener. You grab a fistful and joke that you've got a hot date with a goose. She doesn't laugh. Someone nearby is selling roasted locusts dipped in honey. You stare. You consider. You walk away. Brave but not that brave. Still, it's a reminder. In Egypt, protein is wherever you find it. Fish and poultry are common if you live near the Nile, but inland? You're scavenging for snails, catching mice, or, and we say this delicately, chewing on what may or may not have once buzzed. That's not to say you're suffering. Egyptian cuisine is creative, resourceful. You spot a vendor selling pickled Nile greens, and another boasting fermented goat milk with radish drizzle. Are those menu items or punishments? Hard to say. You pause to grab lunch. A lentil stew served in a cracked clay bowl and a wedge of melon. The lentils are spiced just right, garlic heavy, but not burn your eyebrows off strong. The melon? Warm, slightly gritty, but still refreshingly sweet. It tastes like a small vacation from your usual fava bean routine. You overhear a nearby scribe arguing about olive oil prices. He insists prices are inflated due to a priestly tax. His companion claims it's because the olives are gossiping again. You suspect the heat is getting to them. There's a stall at the far end of the market selling fish wrapped in papyrus and grilled over coals. The aroma is hypnotic. Smoky, salty, just the right amount of char. You splurge. The vendor hands it to you on a reed mat, and as you bite into it, you're briefly transported. This is luxury, at least until a bone jabs your gum like an angry beetle. You spot another food oddity, a stall claiming to have sacred cow cheese. Now, Egyptians weren't huge on dairy. Most people tolerated goat or sheep cheese in small quantities. Cow's milk? Risky. Sacred animals and all. You ask the seller if it's real. He shrugs and says, maybe, depends on who's asking. You nod, back away slowly, and make a mental note to tell your cousin. She loves weird cheese. Back home, you unpack your loot. Mint, lentils, roasted fish, and a half-melted honey cake you forgot was in your bag. You decide to cook something slightly experimental. Spiced lentils with grilled fish, garnished with mint and leftover pickled radish. It's a fusion dish you dub River Surprise. You don't tell anyone what's in it until they've swallowed. As your neighbors dig in, one of them jokes it tastes like the Nile and a garden had a polite disagreement. You take it as a compliment. It's during this meal you remember an odd fact. Some elite households had kitchens with separate stations for making beer, bread, and sweets. Slaves and servants assigned to each. Your entire kitchen is a single clay hearth, and your sweet station is a jar with 2 sad figs. Historians still argue whether average folks like you ever had access to the same ingredients as the elite, just in smaller amounts, or whether class strictly dictated not just how you ate, but what you were allowed to desire. You figure it's a little of both. After all, who's gonna stop you from roasting a goose if you catch one? Well, the goose might have opinions. As evening falls, you clean up, rub mint leaves on your hands, and sit outside under a fading pink sky. Someone's playing music nearby, flute, maybe lyre. You can't see them, but the tune wraps around the village like soft linen. You're full, content, and only slightly worried about the fishbone still lodged somewhere behind your molars. Tomorrow's dinner? Who knows? But tonight, your belly is happy, your fingers smell like mint, and your kitchen hasn't caught fire. All in all, a solid day in the culinary history books. You're jolted awake the next morning by the rattle of a cart and the unmistakable sound of someone loudly bartering over garlic. Again, you shuffle to your doorway, stretch under the rising sun, and wonder, what did people eat when everything ran out? No fish, no lentils, no goose guts to stew? Turns out quite a lot. Welcome to ancient Egyptian survival cuisine, a topic both humbling and a little terrifying. You start your morning like any respectable citizen, by checking your pantry and realizing it's even emptier than yesterday. There's half a jar of dried fenugreek seeds, a few ancient onions, one of which may now qualify as a geological formation, and some stale bread that's harder than your neighbor's opinions about crocodile mummies. Time to get creative. You remember what older folks say, when there's no meat, make porridge. When there's no porridge, chew wisdom. Not terribly helpful, but the first part's valid. You crush what little grain you have left, barley mostly, mix it with water and a bit of honey, and stir it over a small fire. It's bland, gummy, and could probably double as mortar, but it's warm. That counts for something. When times got tough in ancient Egypt, droughts, floods, wars, locust parties, it wasn't just about hunger. It was about substitution. People turned to what they had. Wild greens, lotus roots, acacia pods, even papyrus stalks. You once heard of someone roasting palm hearts until they were crispy. Another neighbor swears by dried lizard tail. You politely decline her dinner invitations. You decide to forage by the riverbank. You gather a handful of marsh herbs, some wild garlic, and jackpot, a cluster of water lily tubers. They look like swampy potatoes and feel like chewing on damp rope when raw, but if you roast them long enough, they're edible. Back home, you toss them in your tiny fire oven, add salt, and crush a bit of old coriander into the mix. The smell is earthy. The taste, like someone whispered vegetable while handing you hot clay. Still, you feel oddly triumphant. Meanwhile, a neighbor visits to trade. She's got dried carob pods and some fermented fig paste that smells like a goat's foot but tastes surprisingly decent. You give her your last stale bread loaf in exchange. Win-win. This is how food survives. Barter, salvage, sheer stubbornness. There's an unspoken rule among commoners. When all else fails, make beer soup. Yes, that's a thing. You mix sour beer with ground bread, onion bits, and garlic. It's served warm, thick, and a little offensive to the nose, but it fills your belly and puts you in a better mood. Historians still argue whether beer soup was everyday fare or just a desperate backup plan for times of scarcity. You suspect both. Or maybe no one wants to admit how often they leaned into barley broth sadness. You head out again, walking past homes where the cooking smoke is thin. Some households clearly haven't had a good meal in days. Food insecurity wasn't just a modern issue. Even in the land of pyramids and gold, the average worker lived meal to meal. Storehouses existed, yes, but much of the grain went straight to the elite or temples. You'd often hear of grain taxes, but never grain handouts. You stop to chat with an old man who claims he once survived 2 flood seasons on nothing but wild reeds and boiled snails. He offers you a snail. You decline, again with the kind of smile that says, "Thank you. I'd rather chew on a papyrus scroll." Still, his resilience is inspiring. You return home to find your neighbor left you a surprise. A small bag of dried chickpeas. A culinary miracle. You soak them, boil them slowly, and mash them with garlic and onion ash. You've just invented proto-hummus. It's gritty, sure, but delicious by survival standards. For dessert, because you're determined to have one, you smear a little of that fermented fig paste on a cracked barley wafer and call it a tart. It's the kind of dish that would get you disqualified from any modern cooking contest. But tonight, it feels like a small victory. You lean back against your mud brick wall, watching the stars blink alive above the palm trees. Your stomach is full, if not thrilled, and your hands smell like garlic and smoke. There's a kind of quiet dignity in surviving on scraps. Not every day in ancient Egypt was a feast, and not every family could offer honey cakes to the gods. But they made do with grit, creativity, and a stubborn refusal to let an empty pantry win. You close your eyes and imagine tomorrow's possibilities. Maybe you'll fish. Maybe you'll find fresh dates. Or maybe that cheese trader will finally cave and accept your offer of a poem in exchange for a goat milk wheel. You smile at the thought. The bread might be stale. The soup might be beer. But you're still here, still full, and still dreaming of something new to cook. The Nile mist is cool this morning, soft on your skin as you step out to start your chores. But something's different. There's chatter at the docks, louder than usual, and it doesn't sound like the usual grumbling over fish prices or someone dropping a crate of melons. A merchant ship has arrived from somewhere far south, beyond Nubia. And that means one thing: exotic food. You hurry over, dodging goats, children, and a priest who looks like he hasn't blinked in 2 days. The ship is small, heavy with cargo, and buzzing with activity. The crew smells like weeks of sweat and unfamiliar spices. You can barely understand the accent of the cargo master, but you do understand the open crates. Dried bananas, cinnamon bark, sesame seeds, honeycombs the size of your head, and the unmistakable glisten of dates so plump they look like they're about to burst into song. You almost cry. Fresh dates have been impossible to find lately. Imported goods were the real culinary flex in ancient Egypt. You may think of it as a land of farmers and river folk, and sure, 90% of daily food was homegrown. But the trade networks, oh, they were glorious. Caravans and ships hauled delicacies across deserts and seas. Pepper from India, myrrh and incense from Punt, exotic birds, pomegranates, wine from Canaan. You watch a scribe argue over a jar of imported olive oil. "This was pressed by virgins," he says dramatically. The seller replies, "Everything is, if you lie hard enough. You move along. Of course, you're not a noble. You can't afford a basket of cinnamon or a jar of Phoenician fig jam. But the merchant has leftovers. Crushed sesame at the bottom of a barrel, broken honey wafers, and wilted herbs that didn't survive the journey in style. That's more your price range. You offer a clay trinket and a fish hook in trade." He shrugs. "Deal." Back home, you do what any good second-tier gourmand would do. You show off. You invite 3 friends over. You arrange the crushed sesame like it's a precious spice, which it kind of is. Drizzle honey on barley cakes like it's ambrosia, and sprinkle the wilted herbs over lentils with the flair of someone who's definitely seen a palace chef from a distance. Your friends are impressed. One even whispers, "Are we nobles now?" You grin. "Tonight, we eat like scribes." You toast with sour beer and chew sticky honey cakes, and for a brief moment, everyone forgets about taxes, bad harvests, and that weird bread mold problem no one wants to admit is spreading across town. You reflect on how food was always more than sustenance in Egypt. It was storytelling, power, trade, status. A pharaoh could declare war over a grain shipment. A priest could refuse a sacrifice because the offering lacked spice. Whole cities rose around trade routes that brought not gold, but onions and herbs. Historians still argue whether food imports were a widespread pleasure or strictly the domain of elites. There's debate about how often commoners actually got to eat things like cinnamon or Indian pepper. You personally believe in rare luck and persuasive bartering. That's how you got sesame tonight, isn't it? You take a date from the tiny stash and eat it slowly. It's soft, lush, sun-sweetened. You try not to cry. You fail a little. Later that evening, while your guests help clean up, one asks if you think the pharaoh himself eats this stuff. You laugh. He probably has a servant chew it first, just in case. But it's a fair question. What did the elites eat, if this is what filters down to you? You've heard stories. Gilded trays of roast goose, wine chilled in Nile ice, bread stuffed with figs and goat cheese. Some say the pharaoh had grapes peeled for him. Others claim he refused to eat unless 3 priests blessed the loaf first. Meanwhile, you're just thrilled to have honey that didn't crystallize into a brick. As night falls, you nibble on sesame crumbs and lie back under the stars. You think about trade caravans winding through the desert, carrying treats you might never see. But tonight, you've tasted a few of them. And that's enough. Tomorrow, you'll go back to fish, lentils, and stale bread. But not tonight. Tonight, you are a chef of the Nile, a host of status, a culinary ambassador between what is and what could be. And you didn't even have to peel anyone's grapes. Tonight, you've gone to bed full, but you don't stay asleep for long. Your stomach stirs. Not with hunger, more like curiosity. You sit up in the dark, listening to the frogs chirping by the canal, and wonder, what was a royal banquet really like? You've heard stories, of course. Every peasant, scribe, and sandal maker has. The elite of ancient Egypt didn't just eat, they feasted. And not like your neighbor's half a fish and a prayer kind of dinner party. No, this was indulgence on a divine scale. So, you do what any proper insomniac would do, you imagine yourself invited to the palace. Let's set the stage. You're no longer a humble artisan. You've somehow caught the pharaoh's eye. Maybe you saved his sacred cat. Maybe you wrote a particularly flattering hymn. Whatever the reason, you're here now, nervously smoothing your linen tunic outside a grand banquet hall, flanked by columns carved with lotus flowers. The doors open. You're hit with the scent of roasted meats, floral oils, and wine that's somehow both sweet and vinegary. You step inside, and your jaw practically detaches. Golden platters, musicians playing lyres and flutes, servants in starched linen gliding like ghosts between guests, and on the tables, pyramids not of stone, but of food, fat roasted ducks, glistening in honey and coriander, bowls of stewed lentils laced with imported cinnamon, fresh pomegranate halves, seeds glimmering like rubies. There's even a melon carved into the shape of a sphinx. You're pretty sure that's for show, but someone bites into the nose anyway. This is not dinner. This is power on a plate. You take a seat near a noblewoman who's arguing about bread crusts. The crust is where the protection lies, she insists, nibbling the edges like they hold a secret. Someone else complains the beer is too cold. You don't ask questions. Servants bring more. Goose liver pâté? You assume that's what it is. It looks like happiness in paste form, lotus root fritters, and these little barley cakes wrapped in fig leaves. You eat cautiously. Everything is rich, heavily spiced, and almost uncomfortably good. You begin to suspect the royal chef has made a deal with the gods. But of course, nothing comes without ritual. Between courses, dancers appear, their bodies painted with gold dust. They move in slow, hypnotic spirals. The music grows low and rhythmic. It's meant to aid digestion, you're told. You pretend to believe it. At one point, a priest stands and blesses the wine. Then someone gives a toast to Hathor, goddess of pleasure, and everyone claps. Even the guests who've clearly had too much wine to know what they're applauding. Historians still argue whether royal banquets were purely ceremonial or part of daily life for the elite. Some suggest these feasts were reserved for seasonal festivals or diplomatic guests. Others believe the pharaoh dined like this whenever he got bored. Either way, the sheer scale of it all is staggering. You catch sight of the pharaoh himself, seated slightly elevated, draped in gold, his plate never empty for more than a breath. He eats slowly, methodically. Someone fans him with ostrich feathers. Another reads him a poem. You consider offering your haiku about onions, but think better of it. Then, dessert arrives. Fruit tarts drizzled with date syrup. Candied nuts rolled in crushed sesame. Goat cheese dipped in honey and wrapped in grape leaves. You bite into something creamy and fig-filled and forget your own name for a moment. You lean back dazed. You've never eaten this much in your life. The noblewoman beside you snorts, "Amateur," and orders a second portion of duck. As the feast winds down, someone plays a harp so softly it feels like a lullaby. Servants bring warm cloths to wipe your hands. You notice half the guests are already half asleep, reclining on cushions, muttering sleepy praises to the gods of food and music. You close your eyes for a second, and wake up in your own modest room, wrapped in your usual linen, with the sun peeking through your shutters. No harp, no goose, no melon sphinx, but your belly is full, your mind spinning with images of golden platters and spice stews. You chuckle to yourself. Maybe you didn't save the pharaoh's cat. Maybe you just dream well. Still, your fantasy holds a grain of truth. The royals did live like that, at least on occasion. And their meals weren't just about flavor. They were symbols of wealth, devotion, diplomacy, and sometimes sheer absurdity. You stretch, yawn, and promise yourself that tonight, maybe you'll grill your onions with a touch of honey. After all, you've been to a royal banquet now. Sort of. You're sitting by the river again, legs dangling lazily over the bank, when an older neighbor plops down beside you with a basket of mystery. She's wrapped the contents in cloth to keep it cool, or to keep the flies guessing. "Try one," she says. You hesitate. "What is it?" "Street food," she says with a grin, "like the kind you'd find down at the temple market." "Don't be dramatic." You take a cautious bite, crispy, slightly sweet, faintly oniony. She nods. "Lentil cakes, dipped in date syrup, a pharaoh's snack for a peasant's coin." Turns out, while royal banquets get all the attention in the scrolls and myths, the real culinary engine of ancient Egypt wasn't in the palaces. It was in the markets, along the Nile docks, under the shade of papyrus umbrellas and reed stalls where food was fast, cheap, and deeply beloved. And tonight, that's where you are. Welcome to the food stalls of ancient Egypt. You walk the dusty paths between open fires and smoking clay ovens. You've got a few copper coins tucked into your sash and no plan but to taste everything that smells edible. First up, lentil patties, mashed and fried, served with garlic sauce so strong it could ward off a tomb curse. You buy two. They're blistering hot, delicious, and possibly the only vegetable you've consumed in 3 days. Next, chickpea fritters, lightly spiced, often wrapped in lettuce leaves. The woman who makes them claims they'll heal your sore joints and cure bad dreams. You nod like you believe her. She's got a falcon tattoo on her neck. You're not about to argue. And then the Nile's favorite snack, dried fish. Specifically, fermented dried fish. Smells like someone lost a bet, but the taste is oddly addictive. Salty, chewy, vaguely smoky. A little goes a long way. You wash it down with a sip of barley beer from a shared clay jug. It's lukewarm, sour, and full of floating bits. Still, you feel mildly heroic for drinking it. Some stalls sell nuts, roasted tiger nuts, the ancient version of trail mix. Others offer small pastries made from ground barley flour and sweetened with honey. You watch one vendor slice open a date, fill it with crushed almonds, then press it shut like a secret. That one? Pure magic. Street food wasn't just convenience, it was community. People gossiped here, debated politics, even consulted healers who doubled as snack vendors. A good lentil stew could fix a bad mood. A burnt barley cake probably started more than one fistfight. You remember a story your uncle once told about a street cook who used to sneak into temple kitchens, steal herbs meant for ritual offerings, and use them to spice up his sausages. That man, your uncle swore, was a genius and a criminal. Historians still argue whether street vendors were licensed, regulated, or just tolerated. There's little in the record beyond vague references in scrolls and graffiti praising one cook's stew as worthy of Osiris, and damning another's bread as dry as mummy wrappings. You pick up something unusual now. Grilled goose skewers. Expensive, yes, but you're treating yourself. The vendor brushes them with honey and vinegar, then sears them over open flame until the fat crackles. You close your eyes. Tastes like celebration. Nearby, someone is selling stuffed onions, layers peeled, boiled, then filled with minced fish and herbs. Very healing, she insists. Also very crunchy. You try one. She's right on both counts. There's even a sweet dish you've never seen before. Small balls of crushed dates, coated in poppy seeds. A passing scribe calls them sleep bombs. You buy 3. He wasn't wrong. Your hands are sticky with syrup and spice. Your tunic smells like garlic and fried chickpeas. Your sandals are coated in dust, and you've probably spent tomorrow's grain allowance on snacks. You regret nothing. You notice something else, too. Everyone eats together. Rich and poor, priest and fisherman. There's a kind of democracy in food stalls. Once you're chewing with your mouth full, status doesn't matter as much. An old man offers you a bite of his roasted leek. You offer a piece of your fig tart. You nod. He nods. This is how friendships are born, over leeks and crumbs. As the market winds down and the lamps are lit, you sit under an awning, full and content. The sounds of chewing give way to laughter, then soft conversation. A child sings a song about honey cakes. Somewhere, a couple argues over who forgot the salt. You take a last sip of beer, watching the Nile shimmer under moonlight. And in this moment, surrounded by strangers and spices, you feel connected to something ancient and warm. Not royalty, not magic, just people eating food. Together. You're still full, honestly, uncomfortably so. But time flows like the Nile, and soon enough your stomach grumbles again. A quiet little protest. You stretch, roll onto your side, and stare out at the dark room around you. Half asleep but curious. What about medicine? You've eaten everything from goose liver to fig paste. But what if your ancient tummy turns on you? So now, drifting further into this twilight journey, you find yourself inside an apothecary's hut. Clay jars line the walls, stacked 3 high, each labeled in a faded scrawl. You sneeze once and catch a whiff of dried thyme, frankincense, and possibly wet linen. A healer appears. A middle-aged woman with one lazy eye and hands that look like they've needed too many poultices. She offers you a seat, a dried fig, and an unsolicited diagnosis. You've got heat in your belly. Fair enough. You've wandered into the world of ancient Egyptian food as medicine, and it's a wild ride. Forget sterile white coats. This is where honey meets ritual and onions fight off demons. She pulls down a jar. Barley flour, she says. Good for digestive fire. Mix it with coriander. Boil. Drink. Vomit. Then you're healed. You blink. Wait, vomit. She shrugs. Sometimes that's the cure. To be fair, ancient Egyptians were ahead of their time in some ways. Honey, used in poultices because it's naturally antibacterial. Garlic, prescribed for strength and to ward off illness. Some scrolls even list it as excellent against heart pain. Onions, said to improve blood circulation and even raise the dead, depending on who you asked. They treated indigestion with mixtures of cumin and mint, nausea with crushed carob and wine, and headaches with, wait for it, ground-up goose fat smeared on your temples. The side effects included smelling like a roasted dinner, but hey, anything for relief. One remedy for stomach cramps involved heating crocodile fat with herbs and rubbing it on the belly. Historians still argue whether this was effective or just an elaborate prank on hypochondriacs. Still, their belief system was holistic. Food wasn't just nourishment, it was energy, balance, sometimes even divine intervention. Each meal had consequences. Eat too much duck? That's heat imbalance. Too little fish? Cold stomach. Sleep on a full belly? That invites spirits into your dreams. Which would explain a lot right now. You glance around the apothecary's hut and spot something truly alarming. A crocodile skull filled with dried berries. You don't ask questions. The healer points to it and whispers, "That's for love spells." You nod solemnly. She hands you a recipe on worn papyrus. Mashed dates, mixed with goat's milk, ginger and fig sap. Good for weak digestion, she explains. Tastes awful. You believe her. And yet, some things still resonate. Herbal teas steeped with chamomile and licorice root. Honeyed tonics. Warm spiced wine for chills. Modern-day nutritionists would approve of half of these remedies. Maybe not the goose fat or magical onions, but the rest. Not bad for a civilization that didn't have microscopes. You're shown a curious tablet etched with a recipe for general health and long life. Raw honey, mashed garlic, mint, beer, taken before sunrise. You try to imagine chewing that on an empty stomach. Your modern taste buds protest. The healer taps the side of your cup. Sip it slowly. Let the gods do the rest. There's something oddly comforting about this mix of medicine, magic, and food. You realize meals weren't just moments of pleasure. They were ways of healing the body, balancing the soul, even petitioning the divine. They had gods for harvest, gods for digestion, gods for wine. Even a goddess named Genenet who supposedly protected recipes and healing formulas. You silently thank her for the lentil cakes and make a mental offering of your last fig ball. In this world, the line between kitchen and pharmacy didn't exist. Your pantry was your medicine cabinet. And so you sit there, sipping your bizarre warm tonic, feeling your imaginary stomach settle. The apothecary hums softly as she grinds herbs behind you. Outside, the Nile sighs against the bank, slow and eternal. You lean back and think, maybe they didn't have hospitals or pills or sterile gloves, but they had ginger, honey, mint, and the belief that the right meal, taken at the right time, could make the world right again. Your eyelids drift. The warmth of the tonic seeps into your limbs. And the last thing you remember before sleep finally pulls you under? The smell of roasted garlic. And one very smug goose honking in the distance. You wake to a dim glow filtering through reed shutters, the scent of something faintly sweet lingering in the air. Your belly is full, your body warm, and for a moment you forget where or when you are. But then you hear it. The rhythmic clatter of clay bowls, the soft murmur of temple bells in the distance, and a rooster announcing a brand new Egyptian day. And like that, we've arrived at your final stop on this culinary journey, the sacred meal. Not just any breakfast, mind you. This one is different, reverent, symbolic, almost whispered. Today you eat with the gods. You're barefoot as you approach the temple grounds, your tunic freshly rinsed in Nile water. A priest greets you with a nod, his hands stained with resin and oil. He leads you past columns inscribed with prayers and falcon-eyed guardians carved into sandstone. The air smells of incense, myrrh, juniper, sandalwood, twisting into lazy curls that drift skyward. Inside, the offerings are being arranged. This isn't just breakfast. This is ritual. The food laid before the altar isn't for mortal mouths. At least not yet. Flatbreads in perfect circles, bowls of figs and raisins, cucumbers sliced precisely, and small roasted birds lined in a neat row, like edible soldiers. There are honey cakes dusted with coriander and pomegranates cracked open like rubies. Every dish, every arrangement has meaning. Bread represents stability. Beer, yes, even the grainy stuff, is a symbol of life and the gods' generosity. Onions ward off evil. Figs connect the physical to the divine. And dates? Well, they're just delicious. Even gods appreciate a sweet tooth. You watch as a high priest fans the offerings with ostrich feathers, chanting in a soft murmur. This sacred meal is called Hetep Dinisu, an offering which the king gives, and it's meant to nourish not just gods, but ancestors, spirits, the very concept of harmony. And here's the twist. After the gods have symbolically dined, the food is shared with the temple staff and community, which means, yep, you get to eat divinely blessed leftovers. Not bad for a mere mortal. You're handed a portion of roasted duck, slightly cooled but still fragrant. The priest says nothing but nods again. You nod back, then dig in, quietly, reverently, trying not to look too excited. Holy food, it turns out, is extra juicy. It's in this meal that you glimpse the Egyptians' real food philosophy. Nothing is separate. Body and soul, hunger and prayer, life and afterlife, all intertwined like braided bread. They didn't just eat to survive, they ate to honor, to heal, to connect. That honey-drenched cake? A nod to Hathor, goddess of pleasure and music. The garlic-stuffed onions? Protection from the jealous spirits lurking between dusk and dawn. Even the barley beer, with its thick sludge, is a sacred act of fermentation, passed down from the gods who first brewed it. Historians still argue whether the gods truly consumed these offerings or simply absorbed their essence. But for the Egyptians, there was no question. Sharing food with the divine was the highest form of gratitude. As you finish your portion, you notice others arriving. Farmers, scribes, even children. Each receives a bite of the sacred spread. No one overeats. No one wastes. Every crumb matters. This wasn't just a ceremony. It was a reminder that food could be a prayer. And in that moment, sitting on the cool temple floor, licking honey from your fingers and watching sunlight creep across the stone, you realize something. You've traveled through mud-brick homes and palace halls, feasted in markets and wept over garlic brews. But here, you finally understand what ancient Egyptians truly tasted with every bite: gratitude, reverence, and a deep, abiding joy in the simple act of eating together. Now, full in every possible way, you exhale. The journey is complete. You rise slowly, offering one last silent thank you to the unseen gods, to the cook who grilled your duck, to the bees who made your honey, and to time itself for letting you wander through this edible history. As the temple doors open and a gentle breeze rolls in from the Nile, your mind begins to drift. And with that, it's time to let go. Wind down 300 words. Your breathing slows. The last flavors of ancient Egypt dissolve on your tongue. Coriander and honey, garlic and fig, the earthy richness of barley. You feel the weight of time press gently on your shoulders, not heavy, but warm, like a familiar blanket. Outside, the river hums softly in the dark. The rush of the day fades. The fires are out, the bowls cleaned and stacked. Everyone has gone to sleep, even the gods. You lie down in your quiet room, now transformed into a temple, a market, a dinner table shared with strangers. You remember the soft bread, the sticky dates, the laughter of a fishmonger who called his cat Pharaoh. You remember the way a simple snack could heal a tired body or mend a grieving heart. And now, as your breath lengthens and your thoughts grow fuzzy, the story slows too. You imagine floating down the Nile, wrapped in linen and memory, your mind gently bobbing in the ripples of time. Every bump in the boat a moment, every wave a flavor, every breeze a blessing. Whatever your day looked like, wherever you're listening from, just know, tonight you traveled far and feasted well. No need to chase sleep anymore. It's already here. You've earned it. So close your eyes, still your hands, soften your jaw, and dream of honey cakes under a copper sky.